I'm 32 male, and I've been married to my wife for 5 years. We've had our ups and downs like anyone else, but we've always worked through it. My wife, 30, came from a close-knit family, or so I thought. Her mother, my mother-in-law, Emile, has always been intense. I don't know how else to put it. She's the type of woman who thinks her opinions are facts, and has this way of belittling you while pretending she's just being honest. I put up with it for years, mainly because my wife insisted that was just how her mom was. She means well, she'd say. At first, I just thought my Emile didn't like me. I wasn't wealthy enough, I didn't have a prestigious job, and I wasn't the type of guy she envisioned for her daughter. Fine, whatever. I don't need her approval to live my life. But then I noticed something strange. Every time there was a family gathering, birthdays, holidays, even barbecues, Emile would invite my wife's ex-boyfriend. Let's call him X. X was her high school boyfriend, and according to my wife, their relationship ended amicably long before we met. I didn't think much of it at first. He was polite enough to me, and my wife didn't seem too interested in him. But after a while, I couldn't ignore the fact that Emile went out of her way to include him. He wasn't just showing up to say hi and leaving. No, he was there for hours, sitting at the table, laughing at Emile's jokes, and even helping with family photos. It was weird, and it was deliberate. One time, at a Thanksgiving dinner, Emile made some offhand comment about how X used to be so good at carving the turkey and handed him the knife, completely ignoring me. Another time, during a game night, she loudly joked about how X and my wife used to dominate Pictionary together. Such a dream team, she said, smiling at me like I was an afterthought. It didn't stop there. Over the years, Emile started dropping subtle, and not so subtle, comments about how X was better for my wife. He's got such a good career now, she'd say. Or, I remember when he used to bring your wife flowers every week. So thoughtful. I bit my tongue every time, not wanting to make a scene. My wife rolled her eyes at her mom's comments, but never really stood up to her. She insisted it wasn't a big deal and told me to just ignore it. But then came the straw that broke the camel's back. Last Christmas, Emile pulled the most insane stunt yet. We were at her house, and, of course, X was there. Emile had gone all out decorating the place, with stockings for everyone hung on the fireplace. As we were sitting down to open presents, Emile handed X a stocking. My stocking. She had literally taken my name off of it and replaced it with his. I stared at it, my blood boiling. What the hell is this? I asked, holding up the stocking. Oh, Emile said with that fake, innocent tone she uses. It was a mistake. I guess I just got confused. Confused? I shot back. How do you confuse your daughter's husband with her ex-boyfriend? X looked uncomfortable and tried to laugh it off, but I wasn't having it. My wife told me to calm down, but I wasn't about to let it slide. This isn't a mistake. You've been pushing him on us for years. What's your problem? Emile finally snapped. I just think X is a better match for her, okay? He's successful, he's polite, and frankly, I think he deserves another chance. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My wife looked mortified, and for the first time, she actually defended me. Mom, this is insane. I'm married. To him. You need to stop. But Emile wasn't done. You settled for less, she hissed. You deserve more than this. She waved her hand at me like I was some kind of stray dog she found on the street. I stood up and left. My wife followed me, apologizing profusely, but the damage was done. I told her I wasn't going to any more family events if X was there. She agreed, but I could tell she wasn't ready to cut ties with her mom completely. That's when I decided to dig deeper. I needed to know why Emile was so obsessed with X. Something about it didn't sit right with me. So I started asking around, discreetly of course. It took a few months, but I eventually got the full story from one of my wife's cousins. Turns out, Emile had been working behind the scenes to get my wife and X back together. She'd been telling X that my wife was unhappy in our marriage and that I was holding her back. Worse, she had been encouraging X to pursue my wife, claiming she'd come to her senses eventually. I was furious. This wasn't just meddling. This was full-blown sabotage. I confronted my wife about it, and she was just as shocked as I was. She swore she had no idea her mom was doing any of this and promised to put an end to it. But I wasn't satisfied with just cutting Emile off. I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions. So, I hatched a plan. It started with a lawyer. I wanted to make sure everything I was about to do was legal. After getting some advice, I decided to document everything. I got screenshots of text messages MIL had sent to X, encouraging him to pursue my wife. I also recorded a phone call between MIL and X, where she admitted to lying about my wife being unhappy. Once I had all the evidence, I sat down with my wife and told her what I planned to do. She was hesitant at first. She didn't want to ruin her relationship with her mom completely. But I reminded her that MIL had been manipulating and lying to both of us for years. This wasn't just about me. It was about protecting our marriage from someone who clearly didn't respect it. I confronted MIL during a family dinner in front of everyone. MIL, Fael, X, and several other family members were there. I calmly explained everything I had discovered, laying out the evidence one piece at a time. The text, the call, the years of manipulation, it all came out. MIL's face turned red, and she started stammering, trying to deny it. But the evidence was undeniable. The rest of the family was horrified. Fael was furious and demanded an explanation. X looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole. MIL finally broke down, screaming about how she was just looking out for her daughter and how she knew best. The room was dead silent after her outburst. No one was buying her excuses. Fael stood up, his face pale with anger. Looking out for her? You've been undermining her marriage. Do you even hear yourself? MIL tried to spin it, turning to my wife. I did this for you. You deserve someone who can give you the life you were meant to have. But my wife had reached her breaking point. Stop, she yelled, her voice shaking. I don't care what you think I deserve. You don't get to make these decisions for me. You've been manipulating me, my husband, and even X. You've crossed every line, and I'm done. I'm done with you. X, who had stayed mostly silent until now, finally spoke up. I had no idea you were lying to me, he said, glaring at MIL. I trusted you. I thought I was helping, but this is insane. I'm sorry to both of you, he added, looking at me and my wife. I won't be coming to any more of these gatherings. I couldn't care less about X at that moment. My focus was on MIL. You've been trying to wreck my marriage for years, I said, my voice calm but firm. You've lied, manipulated, and tried to make me feel like I wasn't good enough for your daughter. Well, guess what? You lost. And now, you're going to deal with the consequences. The consequences came fast. Fael announced he was leaving with us that night and taking some time to reevaluate their marriage. He made it clear he was disgusted by her behavior and wanted nothing to do with her schemes. My wife and I left together, but before we walked out the door, I turned back to MIL and said, "You'll never have control over our lives again. Never." In the days that followed, things escalated. My wife sent MIL a message explaining that she was cutting contact indefinitely. MIL, of course, responded with a barrage of guilt-tripping texts, accusing my wife of being ungrateful and saying she was breaking the family apart. My wife ignored every single one. For the first time, she saw her mother for who she really was, an entitled, controlling person who couldn't stand the idea of not being in charge. Meanwhile, I wasn't done yet. I filed for a restraining order against MIL, based on her interference in my marriage and the evidence I had collected. My lawyer assured me that, given the extent of her meddling and the emotional distress it had caused, I had a strong case. The court agreed. MIL was ordered to stay away from me, my wife, and our home. She wasn't even allowed to contact us directly. The fallout was intense. FIL ended up filing for divorce, citing MIL's obsessive behavior as a major factor. She tried to play the victim, crying to anyone who would listen about how she was being abandoned by her family. But no one was on her side. The rest of the family had seen the evidence and knew the truth. She had no one left to manipulate. As for X, he stayed out of the picture completely. I don't blame him for MIL's actions, but I also don't care to have any kind of relationship with him. He made his own choices by engaging with MIL in the first place, and I don't owe him anything. In the months that followed, my wife and I started rebuilding our lives without MIL's toxic influence. It wasn't easy, especially for my wife. Cutting off a parent, no matter how toxic, is painful. But we both knew it was the right thing to do. We started therapy to work through the emotional fallout, and it's brought us closer than ever. Looking back, I don't regret exposing MIL for what she did. She deserved to face the consequences of her actions, and I wasn't about to let her destroy my marriage. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that boundaries are crucial. No one, no matter how close they are to you, has the right to control your life. So, if you've got an MIL like mine, don't let her win. Stand your ground, set your boundaries, and don't be afraid to take action. Life's too short to let someone else dictate your happiness. Oh, and if you enjoyed this story of well-earned revenge and family drama, don't forget to hit subscribe. Because trust me, there's more where this came from.